Grazie. Benvenuti tutti. We're going live. I'm here right now with the young Italian, and I'm in Chico, California, on the West Coast. Marco is in. Can you tell us where you're at right now, Marco?
I'm in Westchester, New York. Some Italians, more so, I think, in the cities where they're known, like the Bronx and Brooklyn, but there's definitely a lot of Italians here who came from there.
Nice. Yeah, we thought it would be fun today to do this little collaboration, sort of join up and kind of compare Italians and Italian Americans on the West and East Coast in the United States. So that's what we're starting off right now. So let me just we'll speak a little bit of Italian for those of you that are listening that speak Italian. Marco, quanti abitanti ci sono nella città dove vivi? How many? I'll translate it too for people that didn't understand that. How many people live in your city?
So where I live, it's actually pretty small. It's probably around 1,000, not a lot. And obviously, Westchester, where I live, there's a lot of people in total, but certain parts have a lot more than others, and there's smaller towns like where I live, but it's not as populated as say the city, which is also becoming less populated because a lot of people are leaving for different parts. Even we have a place in Florida, so there's places where people you see from Florida are actually from Westchester as well, and they're Italians also, and they also speak Italian. Some don't. Some are just of Italian origin. So yeah, there's definitely a smaller population where I live, but Italians are everywhere. Like my grandfather said, they're even in the soup.
Nice. That's cute. So 1,000 people, that is a really small town.
Hmm.
So you pretty much know everybody around, I mean, in your town, right?
Good number of people, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a high percentage of Italians that live in your town.
No, no,
No.
my town not
Okay.
a town at all, but there's not a lot of Italians. We're probably the most Italian family there,
Okay.
but yeah, no, we're like my dad. He grew up in Arthur Avenue. There were a lot of Italians there, and still some that come back. We've definitely been surrounded by a lot of those kinds of people, whether it be going to an Italian club or even what I'm doing now with social media, just meeting a lot of Italian influencers. Some of them are not really Italian. It's kind of like a marketing thing. And, like even my dad told me, he said a lot of successful Italians, they weren't Italian before they became Italian once they became successful. And it's totally true. So,
Huh. Interesting.
mm.
So when you go out, you're going, what city do you go to that has a lot of Italian resources or Italian culture? Like, what's the closest place near to you that you go to?
Yeah, so there's a lot of places. There's Kensico Dam. They usually have an Italian festival, and
Oh,
my uncle was a tenor, and he
mhm,
sings a lot of like Mario Lanza, that kind of music. So
mhm.
he sing there. We would go once in a while, not that often. Obviously, certain parts of where I live in Westchester, like Harrison, have a lot of Italians. Westlake, which is Thornwood, has a lot of Italians. But overall, all those people usually came from the city, not so much Little Italy in New York City because that was Italian 70s and 80s. It's much like Martin Scorsese time, so that's much older. But Arthur Avenue, a lot of Italians, a lot of people from there. Even their Facebook has 275,000 followers. I just found out, and on Instagram they're around 70,000. But there's
Oh,
more Italians on Facebook, and you could see like there's a big connection there, and it's one of the few places where like certain parts of Brooklyn like Bensonhurst have a lot of Italians, but in the Bronx they don't have a lot of Italians. On Arthur Avenue specifically, certain parts do like Morris Park, but Italians always return to shop, so you'll always see people, and you always see older and middle-aged people, sometimes people like me, like children, but it's more rare. And obviously, like even the church has an Italian mass every single Sunday at 11 a.m. It's a beautiful church as well, Mount Carmel. So yeah,
and you just went.
yeah. I go once in a while just because I go to school near there in Fordham, and I see there's a big big presence around Arthur Avenue, and people talk about it a lot on social media,
Mhm.
even though it's one of the less spoken about places, and
Mhm.
that's why I think like even the Bronx Tale movie was pretty big. But imagine if it were like a Brooklyn or even Little Italy, would have been a lot bigger because those are well known, and
Right.
Arthur Avenue was always like a secret and people didn't talk about it that much. But nevertheless, it is it's really one of the few places where you can, and I did an interview there with one of the owners of a pastry shop who did a wedding cake for my parents. It's one of the few places where Italians still return, and there's still people, it's a lot of memories. They're like holding on to memories, and there's one place where honestly I can say it's good, but he makes the baked cookies like 50 years ago. It just seems like very they're holding on to a lot of traditions that are it's vanishing a lot, and
Mhm.
parents die, and then they're the owners, and then the children don't take over. So there's a lot missing, and really a lot of it's just memories at this point. And yeah, I think the Italian American culture is being replaced, and it's very rare that you'll see Italian American like myself or you who retain the culture with language, which is the most important thing. If you don't have the language, it's much harder to say, that you're Italian and people believe you for it.
Right. Well, so you and I had a different experience though growing up because your parents are Italian, like born in Italy, right?
Hmm.
And so you spoke Italian in the home when you were growing up. My dad was born here in the United States and he never learned Italian from his Italian parents, from my Italian grandparents. So I learned Italian on my own at college and then went to Italy and got my degree and master's and have taught it for many years. But my yeah, so it's just a different but a different experience that we had in terms of acquisition of the language. But I wanted to learn it because of my heritage and because it was very important to me. And I know from all of my I've taught now for 21 years and there's a lot of it mostly Italian Americans that take my class or people wanting to go to Italy that didn't grow up speaking it and so they want to reconnect to that as well sort of like I did so it is important like you said like to connect to the language and yeah so here they're in Chico, just to sort of compare, the Chico has about 120,000 people or so, and there are a lot of Italian Americans that live here. Not a ton of people that speak Italian, but there's a group of Italians that have moved to Chico too. That we get together every once in a while, and it's fun. And they're from all over Italy. Um, Up in the north and central Italy, Naples, Sardinia. Well, that woman moved away, but yeah, but I think you can find Italians probably everywhere, right,
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
the United States. So
Right.
yeah. So do you have are there Italian just out of curiosity because like here in California, Spanish is really popular in terms of like if you're gonna when you take a foreign language at school, most people opt for Spanish. Italian is not offered in any of the high schools, really. Maybe in like the bigger cities like San Francisco, or you know LA, but not here in the town I live in. They had French and Spanish and Japanese, and then I taught Italian at a community college, and they actually cut Italian, so they don't even offer Italian anymore at the local college here. So what about the schools where you live? Is Italian offered
Yeah.
as a
So
choice?
yeah. So in my high school is exactly the way you described it: Spanish and French.
Okay.
Some Latin, no Italian. It was very strange, and honestly, I think Italian in general, I have strong opinions about it, but I think that there's a reason they don't include Italian, and I think in general, Italians have been spat on, and they continue to be spat on today with shows like The Sopranos, which I just think, and a lot of people don't see it this way, but I think that when and it's very different in California and New York, which is definitely more left. But I think that there's this stigma that Italians are more old school, and you can see that with Arthur Avenue, and they kind of hold on to the traditions. And not that they're prejudiced, but obviously, places like Arthur Avenue have become much more diverse. Like the rest of the Bronx, there's more Hispanics, there's more African Americans, there's Asians, there's everybody there now. So
Mhm.
there's this stigma that at times are all like, "Oh, it's our neighborhood," and I don't believe in that. And I think that shows like The Sopranos create this negative portrayal of Italians, and that most people don't understand, but it is the most beautiful language in the world for many, and it Rome influenced America, and I think Italy has changed the world like no other country ever. And just having that language is such an amazing thing, and really everybody loves the Italian language. And there's so many songs from Italy that have become world famous, and everybody knows about. You could play any tune. I mean, everybody knows like Ave Maria and
Mhm.
Funicola. Everybody knows
Right.
that,
Mhm.
and Italian is such an incredible culture, but it gets pushed aside for Spanish and French, which is not as relevant overall in the long term.
Mhm.
Yet, for some reason, I don't know why, but Italian culture has always been like, whatever. Like, it's disappointing that in my school they didn't have any Italian, and I just think in general most people don't understand what it
Yeah.
means. But everybody watches The Sopranos, and everybody thinks, oh, that because that's what they think we're capable of. And I think people like us are so much more capable than you think. And it's just, yeah, I think it's weird that Italian is not offered, whether it be in California or New York. I see in both instances the only place that Italian is really offered are in more Italian towns. Like there's certain towns there's more Italians, and yeah, therefore Italian is offered, but only
Mhm.
because more Italians live there, and there's a Italian professor or teacher
Yeah.
in a high school. So it's very strange, and yeah, it's a pattern,
Right.
and no way that they just forget Italian. It's
Yeah.
they know it, but they either there's some mental click that makes them just brush it aside and put Spanish ahead, which nobody needs to go to school to speak Spanish because it's spoken nearly everywhere. And at this rate, I think a lot of people are going to be forced to speak it, like myself. Like I do soccer training, and I spoke to people only in Spanish. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying we're coming to that point where Italian culture is something that's disappearing. I would rather hold on to something like that than it's history and culture that is not as relevant. They're kind of doing it just to make, because they feel bad for certain people, but not a lot of people feel bad for Italians because I think the culture has been transformed into something that it's not, and that's what shows like the Sopranos and they represent. And one more thing, I just want to say to our three people watching right now, we got 2 likes. Thank you for watching, and this is a place where you will truly find the truths that are never spoken about. But places like my house at the dinner table at night, I hear so many wise words and people who truly held on to the culture. And even now, starting YouTube, I'll just say I was always Italian before and after, and it's not just the word is not just a marketing phrase, which it
Right.
has become. So thank you for watching. Keep listening. Now we got 5. Let's go.
Yeah. I just noticed that I didn't even notice that people were watching, so, yeah, that's great. Yeah, the thing about Italian, though, as well, is that I agree, it's an amazing language, beautiful language, influential culture, everything in history, but Italy is pretty much the only place where Italian is spoken in the world, whereas Spanish, there are 20 Spanish-speaking countries in the world, and then in California, we speak a lot of Spanish because it borders Mexico, and, so Spanish is definitely more useful in terms of travel, and it's used more often. And I actually got a teaching credential in Spanish because like I said, they cut Italian. And so I teach Spanish at the high school level. And then I teach Italian, online and privately. But but yeah, it's too bad that I feel like there's less of a value for language in general. And I feel like a lot of the time, English is the most spoken language in the world. So a lot of times when Americans travel, they think like, well, everybody speaks English, so I don't really need to learn a language. Learning a language is really hard. So, Italian is really hard. The grammar is really difficult. So there's that too. Just like putting the time in and the effort, and it's difficult. It's interesting though. I know a lot of people who are getting their Italian dual citizenship lately, like Italian Americans who have, their grandparent born in Italy, and you have to take an Italian grammar test in order to get your Italian citizenship. Did you know that?
I'm actually getting my Italian citizenship now, but it's such a difficult process. We can talk about it a little
Yeah,
more. I didn't actually know that, and that's also something like now in America, nobody needs to take that because most people, like a lot of people who come to America, don't speak English and don't really know the culture that well. So that's actually foreign to us that we would even think you have to take a grammar test for a certain country.
right. Yeah. Yeah, but it's another reason for studying Italian
Mm.
because if, people are planning on doing that, they do have to be able to understand. I don't know if the test is oral. I think it's a written test, but you do need to have a pretty moderate level of understanding of Italian grammar. So, yeah. So another reason. Yeah, I'm glad that, we're doing what we're doing, just, like, keeping Italian alive. I like you too, it's not for me, it's about, like, my heritage, it's about, like, my passion for Italy, for the language, that's why I'm doing all of this. It's not for, the money.
Yeah, for sure. Even just, going out of your way just to say who you are to the world, I guess it's important to, express yourself and express something that's really been covered by like stereotypes and a lot of nonsense that's and misperceptions. I don't blame people. I blame the people who are at the top of you think Italian, you think like Robert De Niro, whomever, but that isn't really representative of Italy. And if you look at them, a lot of those people weren't really Italian before or after, and almost none of them speak Italian. And even like on social media, we'll see like growing up Italian, we'll see hardcore. A lot of people. Some of them are just really like, it's just some of it's really dumb. Like there's this guy named Michael something Franzese, not Michael, someone else. But like I just see a lot of people, Guido, and it's not. It's supposed to be funny and it's supposed to be a joke, and
Yeah,
there's a good proportion of people out there that watch that, and I don't think it's the majority, but I think it is definitely there's a good proportion of people who like that stupid stuff. But at the end of the day, most true Italians understand that we're more than that, and that's not really representative of Italy in any way. And I think ultimately, they haven't been their voices haven't been promoted. They haven't made an effort to say, hold on, well, this is not representative of Italian culture. Sopranos doesn't represent anything Italian at all. It's completely irrelevant, and it's just like just a bad joke, really. But it's told in a way that people like it, and starting in the 1970s and 80s, there's a lot of movies that came out between The Godfather and Raging Bull, and they're well-made movies, but they're not really representative of the Italian culture. I think we're yet to see one movie that represents the true Italian heritage and the struggle. It's spoken about a lot by those people, and you'll hear like even politicians talk about it. And I'm a member of the NIAF, which is the National Italian American Foundation, and you'll see a lot of famous people who spoke there. Like there's Steve Scalise, there's Nancy Pelosi, there's
mhm,
Stallone, some of the presidents, Giada De Laurentiis, but they don't. At the end of the day, like you said before, with the only place where Italian is spoken is Italy. Also, Malta it is their second language actually,
right,
which is pretty close. But
mhm,
overall, yeah, it's mostly Italy, and even Italy, like I could see that Italy is not really it's not Italian anymore, and there was a good clip from Italo-American. They spoke about how Italy is just surviving on stuff that was created thousands of years ago. They're surviving on the entire South survives on restaurants, tourism, gelato, margherita, pizza. That's what it survives on. If you take
Mhm.
that, the South will not. It's literally abandoned. I mean, the town where my dad lived used to be thriving, beautiful Sarno, which is right next to Salerno, and now it's
I've
completely
been to
vacant.
Salerno.
Yeah, it's completely vacant. It's sad. It's kind of like, like America is bad, but then we look at all the places in Italy. I mean, they've been abandoned, and a lot of them have been replaced by newcomers. But nothing wrong with that. But the problem is there's no Sarnese there. There's no Italians there anymore, and a lot of the South has been abandoned. And
Mhm.
frankly, North is not as cultured. The food isn't as good, but it's more commercial. People go there.
Bologna is supposed to be the capital of food in Italy.
Right, and it's not because there are places in the South that make much better food. I mean,
Right. No,
body
that I mean, my
body
experience traveling too is that the more rural that you go, the better the food is. Obviously, like when you're in a huge city and there's tons of tourists, the food is gonna it's just not the quality is not gonna be as good. But when it's smaller and it's handmade and fresh, I mean, the best cheese I ever had in my life was when I was in Sicily and the ricotta came from the farm that morning. It was just it's not from the supermarket in Milan or whatever. But the ricotta there was a lot better than the ricotta here. So, do you travel to Italy often with your family?
well, I just want to add to that quickly. Like even my aunt and uncle, they live in Isernia, which is also in the south. It's about 3 hours from Naples, and
Uh-huh.
it's a nice, quaint town. It's small, and there's actually a big hill where you
Uh-huh.
go. And I know a lot of people who died there because now they put in railings, but there used to not be railings, and there would be cars and motorcycles. They'd fly off, but
Oh.
it's a nice place, and it's
Mhm.
very quaint. And we go there, and she has dogs that hunt for tartufo, truffle,
Mhm.
and like we have the fresh, everything's fresh mozzarella. They have horses, they make milk, and a lot of things. And yeah, I mean, you don't find that anywhere else in a big city, which is it's very rare to find that. And if you do find that, it's from someone who like there's a place called Songe Napoli in New York City. My dad's friends with the owner. And the reason the food is so good is because he's from Naples and he brought that back there. Well,
Mhm.
it was good, but then what he did was he I guess he's not as active. He's more on like Instagram posting videos, and he let his employees who are not from there take over, and the food went down the drain. I'm not going back there because you can, and that's another thing in Italy too. Like a lot of them are not Italian, or maybe they don't. A lot of people don't know how to cook, but they use Italian ingredients, and that makes up for their lack of knowledge on how to cook because the ingredients are so good.
Yeah.
I do travel to Italy probably once a year. Like I didn't go this year, but I went last year, and whenever we go, we try to maximize as much as we can do. Go to
Mhm.
various places in Italy, especially the south, just because I think the north is probably richer, but it's not as beautiful naturally for the food. I don't think the people are as nice, and I think it's just more businessy. Yeah, like you said, even Sicily, which is, and it all comes down to, it's a long history, but the South being excluded and not treated fairly. And I even have an uncle who to this day tells me I'm not Italian, I'm Sicilian because they have
Oh,
been mistreated so many times. And
yeah.
yeah, it's pretty sick. And that's what created mafia. And then they came
Right.
here and led to more stereotypes. And it's not okay.
Well, every Sicilian that I've met, they say that they're Sicilian, not Italian, which is,
Hmm.
but also that's because Italy, people have more allegiance because the country unified so late. People have more Italians have more allegiance to their region, not to the country as a whole, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah. I know this is. I feel like we could like talk all day. So many different things to talk about. We should do this again. And what kind of what should we talk about next time? We could talk about anything. We could talk about I mean, food would be a fun topic.
Yeah, that's definitely a great topic. And even just how to learn a language, and I think I found a pretty simple formula for learning Italian and most languages. I think
Ooh,
a lot of people
share.
say like something my grandmother would always say is, like, "What's this? Find out what this is," and how do you say, like, finger and everything that's around you. I don't think that helps as much, and I think that's more basic, like, people know just certain words, and, like,
Mhm,
even in English, there's certain words that we use that are come from Italian, like taciturn, which comes from Italian taciturno, which means, like, silent and reserved, but I think it's important to talk about how, like, to learn a language, you need to just know all I literally like, when I went to Italy, I remember just regurgitating a lot from the past, but eventually started talking I just started talking, and then it inspired me to learn a lot more because it was kind of like godsend, like a miracle that I just learned it so quickly. And then I went home, I just started remembering all the verbs because all I knew was the present. So I
mm,
all the verbs, and then I was able to, and then add that with the direct objects, and then you're able to say
mhm.
sentences and definitions. It's really not as difficult, and it just kind of just pieced together for me. I'm not perfect, but I'm definitely. Most people don't view me that way. They think like I speak fluent. Even the people who do speak Italian don't think I. They really think I'm 100% in it, and I think if you know that, it helps you to get by. So that would be a great subject. I'm sure as a professor who is forced to interact with students every single well, not forced, but is who does for a living teaching and interacting with students every day, a lot about that, so that's something we could talk about.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that I mean, I have spent like many, many years teaching language, mostly Italian, but now Spanish. And I think the most important thing is to find similarities. And like you said, the word taciturn, taciturno, there's so many cognates between English and Italian. There's so many cognates between English and Spanish. And then there's so many words. If you know Spanish, you can learn Italian more easily because they're very similar. The structure is very similar. So many words that are even identical. So all of that is like important, like the mindset. I've talked about that in some of my videos, the growth mindset, seeing, things in a way that like are achievable, and instead of like some people are good at language and some people aren't, that's a very defeatist attitude, like because you can learn anything that you set your mind to, but you have to expose yourself continuously too, and you have to that's why we have these social media channels. Learn Italian for Travel, the Young Italian. You're bringing culture to people. So, and language. I've seen some of your videos where you speak just in Italian. I always try to teach little tidbits of grammar on my Instagram, and I explain why. Just for a moment, people can, oh yeah, that's why, or this is what this means. Through pictures. I have a ton of videos on YouTube. I'll go over 60 videos explaining all of those grammar tidbits. I wrote a book, The ABCs of Italian Travel, so people can see it all written clearly. But it's like you have to do all of that stuff continuously, and then I always tell people to try to like seek out a class because that really kind of pushes you to like um, perform. But parliamo un po' in italiano alla fine, prima
Yeah,
di chiudere la chiamata. Ok,
sì.
è stato divertente parlare con te, Marco.
No, piacere è stato tutto mio.
E che fai oggi? Che fai questa domenica pomeriggio?
Come te c'ho una piscina, quindi entriamo nella piscina e poi invitiamo l'altri famiglia, mia nonna, e no, mangiamo insieme.
Che bello!
E tu?
Sì, anche noi, mangiamo in famiglia tutte le domeniche, allora andiamo dai miei genitori oggi per la cena, con mia sorella e la sua famiglia, i miei nipoti, sì.
Mhm.
Sì.
And for the 2 people that we have right now, we got 5 likes, but we can't see your names, but we love you. But
Yeah, I know, thank you
I
for tuning.
help me to get to 300 and subscribe to Danielle,
Yeah,
alright?
yeah, and the young Italian, thank you for being here, and check Marco out on Instagram and YouTube. Maybe we can do an Instagram live sometime too.
Mm.
Cool. Okay, grazie Marco, grazie a tutti voi. Oh,
Grazie
wait.
mille, ciao. Ciao.
Ciao. Giornata.